Greetings, good evening, Shabbat Shalom to everyone in the space. Thank you so much for being patient. There's a little bit of delay, but we are here. First, we definitely want to make sure that we open the space, giving thanks to the Most High God, the Creator, the source from which we all come, and also giving thanks to Chief Yuya for creating this space for us to share this reading with you tonight. Just a little bit of housekeeping. Remember, there is a 20-second delay. So as we ask questions or respond to some of your comments in the chat, just be patient with us as we manage the delay. So without further ado, Ema Precious, will you take it away with the preface?
Greetings. So, the Anu Foundation's preface states this book is not to be read only once. Read the words of this book of knowledge and wisdom out loud. Discuss the convictions of this work with your Anu brothers and sisters. Share this information with your people. This publication should be read daily. Every line in this book can be taken out of context and studied on the strength of its own potential, and the truth is to be deliberated. Okay.
Thank you so much, Ema Precious. So this evening, we are going to be continuing the readings within the section of the New Way under family and generational curses. And the piece that we're going to be focusing on really focuses on training. So you'll notice that we put learning was the screensaver or the thumbnail, and that all goes along with training and practice and honing a skill. So what we'll be doing this evening, first I'll ask a question so that everyone can be prepped, is how do we train for marriage? So I'm going to ask that, as we go along, we will be working through this reading and we'll actually be creating or summarizing a list as we go. So I'm going to ask you to listen with a keen ear and jot down what you are gleaning from the share and from the reading as things that will go on your list as you think about how we train for marriage. And there will be some questions in between and at the end, but that's the main part. So we really look forward to you engaging in the chat as we go through this reading. So we'll start off by reading the section on training under generational curses within the families, the section on family. Training for matrimony is imperative. When we study a craft, we initially study the mechanics of that craft. A physician first learns how to diagnose and then prescribe based on their knowledge of physiology and body workings. Over the course of practice, their navigating around the body becomes less mechanical and more reflexive. Through time and practice, we must learn the body of marriage. The more we learn about ourselves, our natural mate, and the purpose that the Creator has for union within the kingdom, our reflexes will activate with a silk-like action because we are well prepared. So,
Yes.
we are going to take this reading and break it down line by line as we understand in our conversation with one another on how we understand and have internalized this part of the reading. So, Ema Precious.
Sure. So, what we're going to do, right, is we're going to use the concept in the example. So, we're going to examine the life of a physician, if you will, and really think about throughout this process what it takes, what it really, really takes, right? And again, this is all about training, right? Matrimonial training. So the first line says training for matrimony is imperative. So with each line, we'll be crafting a list of training imperatives. So make sure you're keeping a list, okay? And you can add what you believe your training imperatives are, and it's all from the text itself. Okay, so matrimonial training must come within the community. So when you think about training for matrimony and the fact that this statement, this sentence is acknowledging that without training, there would not be a successful matrimony. We began to wonder, well, where would that training come from? So the training will come from your community.
Mhm.
But of course, you have to wonder, well, what is matrimony? Earlier, Sister Deidre referred to it as marriage, right? But we're going to dig a bit deeper into how ANU defines matrimony and what that process is throughout this dialogue.
Mhm. So, additionally, so I'll just like repeat a little, just in case you missed it, with regards to matrimony, which is also marriage, and we'll also get into that definition as we go further along in the reading. But for purposes of this paragraph, we want to make sure that we are understanding what we're talking about, like what we're training for. I'll just include that marriage is the consummation of two partners. It's also the final step in a line of how we, court, betroth, and move through becoming one with another, with your mate. So, moving on to the next sentence. When we study a craft, we initially study the mechanics of that craft. So when we think about this sentence, there are a few words that stand out, right? There's study, which is mentioned twice, and there's the idea of mechanics. So when we were thinking about this, and there's also craft. So immediately I thought, well, when a person is training for something, it's the idea of learning your craft. You don't just, yes, sometimes we're born with talents, but there's a sharpening that has to happen. So you have to learn your craft, learn the skill of that thing, right? So taking the when we think about mechanics, it's mechanics are the inner
Mm-mm.
mechanics are the inner workings of a thing. So we can even look at uh, applied mathematics, right? So when you're in math class or in your applied mathematics class, the mechanics, before you get to that, it's learning what that formula is, right? It's the front loading. So what's the formula? But then when you look into applying that formula, that's the mechanics of it. It's show me your work. So you can know what a formula is and how that formula gets to something, but you have to know the inner steps and the mechanics of solving for X. So when we think about the mechanics of a craft and studying that craft, it's really about understanding that yes, while we may have natural talents or inclinations to something, there's a honing and a sharpening, as I said before. So when we think about the idea of like a doctor, yeah, there's some front loading and education that has to happen before he or she moves to the next step of that career. Was there anything you'd like to add, Emma Precious?
Sure. Um, I, I, what I began to do is connect the idea of matrimony being a craft in and of itself. And with the idea of, or the assertion that matrimony is a craft in and of itself, I began to kind of wonder, oh, all right, I know a craft is a skill, right? A craft can be something you crafting, right? You make things with your hands. But some of the other definitions of a craft is an art,
Mhm.
right? Or the ability to create. And with that, I began to examine like a craft being an art and a science. And the idea of the mechanics being the science behind the thing, and that there needs to be this balance between the right brain and the left brain, and how it works together in order to manifest something. And in this instance, it's the creation and maintenance of matrimony. So
Mhm.
yeah, so we're gonna dig in even more.
Right. So learning how a thing works, right? So mechanics to know and learn how matrimony works.
Mhm. So if you're keeping track, we're going to just kind of go through. So far, for crafting a list of training imperatives, you should have matrimony, you should have community, and you should have mechanics. So just giving you a little clue there. So I'll read the next line. A physician first learns how to diagnose and then prescribe based on their knowledge of physiology and body workings. So when we examine this particular line, when you think of the training of a physician, it actually doesn't begin in medical school, right? It begins way in advance of that. Normally, the training begins by high school, if you're going to be preparing to become a physician. So while this line acknowledges, needing to have a thorough understanding of physiology and body workings. Um, when you think about what the workings of the body is from the perspective of a physician, you can begin to appreciate what you as the individual have to do when preparing for matrimony. You need to know your body. You need to understand yourself and how you function, both internally and externally, before you can even begin to imagine getting to a point where matrimony is an option, before you can get to the diagnosis and the prescription. So that's just something to think about.
Right. So, like I said before, when we take the example of the physician, let's think about it. So, as Ea Precious said, it really starts like in high school, right? That conceptualization. Then that person goes on to college. Then there's medical school. Then there's testing, then medical school, then some more testing. And then there's residencies and fellowships. And then there might be some further years before that person maybe even starts their own practice, whether it be something generalized or specialized. So there's definitely, like we said, some front loading where you gain all this information before you move. So there's that knowledge before you move into the action and you gain that wisdom and then understanding of what your craft is. So then moving a little bit forward, keeping with that same example and idea of the physician, we also know that they have to continue to study, right? So there's such a thing called continuing education credits, or I think it's medical education credits. There's, grand rounds and in-services that they have to attend. And that's where we also get research. There's a constant studying up because life and the body is always evolving. Things are changing, things are transforming. So, in the same way that you have to load and know and learn about your body or marriage, there's also continuing to learn because it's going to evolve and you have to evolve with it. And so that's where we think about bringing fluidity and movement to matrimony. Um, another concept we were talking about, when you think of um, being fluid, it's really important because if not, then what happens? It hardens, right? It crystallizes. And something Ema Precious said during our conversations as we were prepping for this is crystallization, when it comes to the body, is a representation of disease, right? And something we always say in ANU, perfection is death. So when we're continuously moving, that's because we're evolving. We have to evolve because if not, you get stuck in that crystallization, and then that's death, right? So, just a tidbit. So, what we're pulling from this is that knowledge of yourself, right? So, knowing how your body works, knowing that physiology. So, Ema Precious, what would you say that word is? So, I've given them like the explanation. What is the word that we're going to take from that?
Hmm. Body workings.
Workings. That's good.
Yeah.
2 words.
Mm-hmm. It's the body work, because you have to know thyself. You have to know the inner workings of your body,
Mhm.
um, because you are personifying the body of that is coming into oneness with your mate, right? To become one body, which we'll get into a little later.
So, moving to the next sentence. Over the course of practice, their navigating around the body becomes less mechanical and more reflexive. So, the words that stood out in this sentence, in this line, were navigating, mechanical, and reflexive. So, starting with navigating. So, when I think about navigating, I always go to the water. And you should say, you always go to the water. I always think about a ship and a navigator. You know, when we think about, you know, when they say this place was discovered, the navigators were Moorish, you know. So I'm always thinking of navigators being on a ship, on a vessel, on water. And so when I think of that, that makes me think of being fluid. So that's a key right there, is being fluid when we are over the course of practice, because we want to make sure that we're not stagnant and that we're constantly moving. That goes with that evolution, right? And then we move into the idea of being mechanical. So when I think about mechanical, I think of like a robot, right? So like a tin man or something like that. And it moves really clunky, right? In the beginning, especially when something's new. So there's going to be these jerky movements, very mechanical and awkward movements. So the reason why you want to make sure that you become then reflexive is because it's moving from that knowledge that you have, that knowledge of matrimony that has been given to you and defined by your community, and then moving to that wisdom, which is the doing. So in that doing, maybe there will be some clunky and jerky movements, but eventually, as you are growing and being fluid and evolving with matrimony, then you become reflexive. And so if we think about we're keeping with our same idea of the physician, I want to make a clarification that you know, when you go to the doctor and the doctor hits you on your knee and they say testing your reflexes, so we're not really referring to like that kind of knee-jerk reaction, right? Or the automated response. It's more reflexive in the idea of being reflecting, right? So you're reflecting back to your knowledge gained from your community, and then moving as a fluid individual within your union. Ema Precious, anything to add?
Sure. Yeah. Um, Navigate, mechanical, reflexive. So, an example that came to mind is the idea and moving from one system to the next, right? Moving from a more herky jerky, mechanical, kind of structured, rigid, crystallized perspective of matrimony to a more fluid and reflexive, right? Fluid, reflective like water. So, being that mirror. And being, the balance to what's needed in every situation. If you think about residency, even if it's just based on your experience from television shows, what do you see? You see a chief resident. You think of rounding, right? There's rounds that are made, and each resident has their notes. And so you read off, or the chief resident reads off some, this is what's going on with this individual, right? So they're reading that off so that the residents draw upon their rote knowledge of physiology and the body workings and what the possible diagnosis could be, in order to then make some, recommendations for how treatment should happen. The fact that they're mechanically going through their notes and they're questioning, that is that rigid, really not sure, not fluid approach to managing the situation. So they haven't gotten that experience just yet. But over time, where they get to is more of that reflexive, almost intuitive. Okay, I recognize this. I've seen this before. I know how to manage it. And we may not go exactly by the book, but I know this is the right thing for this patient because I've seen this before, or this looks like something that I've managed or seen successful outcomes with, a particular intervention. So again, we're talking about matrimony, and we're crosswalking that with the experience of a physician to help elucidate like how you can conceptualize the idea of how you craft and how you train for matrimony. You can't get stuck or stagnant. There is no by the book. There is no, my mother said, TV showed me, fairy tales depicted it this particular way, right? You've got to first know yourself, and in knowing yourself, understand your responsibility and your purpose here, and then recognize your mate and their responsibility as you all become one. So
Right.
yeah. So
Right.
with that one, I know we have to know the word, right? We said it like 20 times. So it's reflexive. And you know what? I want to touch on one other thing. I know Sister Deidre spoke to the knee jerk reaction, and another component of being reflexive could actually be going into autopilot. So I think you touched on that as well, but a little bit, yeah. So the idea, right? Because we want to be very clear about what this is not, right? The reflexive that we are not referring to is the one where you're reactive, right? It's also not the one where you have that knee jerk, which is the knee jerk reaction. It's also not, there's a reflex where you can get in your car and you're kind of daydreaming and you wind up home, and it's not that either, right? Because that's almost that crystallization that we're talking about. That is really death. And so that in this instance, that would be death of the union, right? Death to the fluidity that's required um, in matrimony. So those are the things that it is not. And there's a challenge for you. Really dig into the definition of the word reflexive because you'll learn a lot.
Right. I think that's like true for when we do these readings, like, and this is why it's key, right? If you've noticed, we are reading line by line. And so one of the directives in the tome is that not only should it be read daily, but that each sentence can be read on its own and taken out of on its own context. So we want to make sure that we're explaining this is a live demonstration on how we're taking each sentence and showing own. And the reason why they stand on their own is because there's a deliberate use of vocabulary and words. And so when you think about a word like reflexive, right? That's our word. It's not necessarily what you think. If you look things up in the dictionary, sometimes they have several meanings. So you really have to dig into what meaning is going into a specific sentence and why a word was placed there. And so, in doing that, that's also a way that we remove ourselves from that autopilot, right? And also help with reading comprehension. So I just wanted to put that little tidbit in there.
Yeah, and it also just helps to give context, right? Because we may have our understanding. There would be some that'll say, "Well, yeah, so then this allows me to be reactive in my union." But again, that's not the reflex that we're referring to.
Right.
So, by defining a thing, it helps to kind of identify its contours or its boundaries, which helps to further clarify the context. So I will read the next sentence. Through time and practice, we must learn the body of marriage. So again, we're back to the body, right? And through what? Through time and practice. Time is something we have, whether we want it or not. Every second, every nanosecond is accounted for by the moon, and the sun. Now, with that, the key is really practice. We've spoken and we've shared really candidly in past shares here about how we've used time, how we have squandered time, how we kind of miscalculated, in many ways, our formula for the best way to navigate through space and time. So, in this, again, keeping it within the context of training for matrimony, one, what does your community teach you about what matrimony is? What tools does it give you to practice the act of being a dutiful mate within your union, right? Or within the body of marriage? So, those are two things to really consider for yourself. Um, and with that, the only other thing that I think we want to really give as a takeaway is this acknowledging that time is a precious commodity that you're not able to get back. So it really is imperative that you examine how you can create, if you're mated, how you can create opportunities to practice in order to learn the body of your marriage, because every body is different, right? Just like every body type is different. um every individual is different. And then, of course, the union that those two individuals create is going to be different in purpose and in function. And so it's important that you know and reflect what it is your union represents.
Exactly. It's our most time is our most precious commodity, right? And how many times do we have a lack of respect for time? And I think this sentence for me really summed up this and the next one. It was like the first summary of all the previous lines that we read before, and it basically like the main takeaway for me was the time that we have should be used to fulfill our purpose and hone our most valuable skills. So that's both self and with your mate, finding a mate and being with your mate, and in that and being um, fluid and evolve in that union. So, a quick question. This is a supplemental question, and we'll make sure that we put it in the chat regarding time and practice. Well, first, before I say that, so the list, Ema Precious, the list
Sure.
that comes
Yes,
list.
yes, yes, yes. Okay, so we have matrimony. And more important than just the one word, know what matrimony is. How do you define matrimony for yourself? Um, Community. The only way for you to know what matrimony is to have it defined by your community, because every community is going to give a different definition for what successful matrimony looks like therein. The next is mechanics. And so mechanics, we were thinking of applied mathematics. So how are you applying what you've gleaned from your community in order to come up with the ultimate formula, right? Which is that man, woman, and child, all connected, of course, to the Most High. Then there is physiology slash body workings, which is the idea of knowing thyself. You need to know how your body works. You need to know how you function so that when you come into union with your mate, you know how that new body functions, right? The body of marriage, how that functions. Then there's reflexive. So once you know how it functions, you know what to project back to create that balance and that homeostasis or that stasis within, I don't want to say petri dish, but that's what came to mind, within your union, right? Because the chemistry is different, and it is in some ways like, kind of a petri dish, right? Because it's just your unique chemistry and the synergy between the two of you. Um, and then there's time and practice. And then we're going to get to the last sentence.
Yeah. So the quick question before we hit the last sentence, and please put your answers in the chat, is how have you used time to practice? Or you can put how you've squandered it. But we really want to hear from you. How have you used time? Okay. So as we move to the final sentence, I'm going to read there. The more we learn about ourselves, our natural mate, and the purpose that the Creator has for union within the kingdom, our reflexes will activate with a silk like action because we are well prepared. So as I said before, this definitely for me was a summation of all the five sentences that was said before. So first, it's really looking at that knowledge of self, partner, and the body of marriage, right? The more we know ourselves, our natural mate. And if you remember from a few readings ago, Ema Precious and I did touch on the topic of what is your definition of your natural mate. So that to me is like, taking us from the knowledge of self and knowledge of your partner, and how it's that first step to moving from knowledge to wisdom, or moving in that action, that do. And then we move into how the union fits within the vision for the kingdom. So if we remember, we did a few Shabbats ago. We talked about the graph, that the image that is in the Anu way under declarations of truth. So there is the Emi, or the spirit, the breath, and that breath comes from the Most High Yah. right? And then it moves down to the man who then provides and pours into the woman, and then women pour into the children. So when we think of that divine, that vision, it to me speaks the divine purpose. You know, what is the purpose for this union as Yah sees it, and how you're supposed to be moving. And then I think what's important for us to do is to also remember there's the reflection part. So what are we reflecting? So again, we spoke about this before in a different reading. It's that reflection of the Elohim. You know, so when we think about reflection and vision, it's remembering that all things come from Yah and then flow down through the hierarchy that is family, right? And that's the section that we're in, right? Family. So that's what we are reflecting. And so then we go and think our reflexes will activate with a silk like action because we are well prepared. So this is the part where it's really second nature, right? Because if we're moving in our purpose, we're moving in our purpose, and we're moving with the purpose for that union, it becomes second nature because we are also used to that fluid navigation as the union evolves, and things just become a natural sense of self and of your natural mate. So I want to end that last sentence with, you know, as long as we are moving under the Most High Yah and understanding what the union is and what it's supposed to be and how we fit into it, then it becomes second nature. So I'll end it with that. And I want to just rephrase the question, and then we'll take you back through the list. And hopefully, you were jotting down and you've put in things, and I'll then go to the chat. But so the initial question was, how do we train for marriage? So we were forming training imperatives and a list that we had going on. So in a bit, I'll go to the chat to see if there's anything in that. But before I do that, Ema Precious, was there something you wanted to add regarding this final sentence?
Yeah, sure, sure. So, matrimony. When you think of, generational curses and you think of matrimony, I'm sure the last thing, I'll speak for myself, the last thing I thought of was learning, study, training. Um, but woven throughout these six sentences, I believe, 6 or 7 sentences, every sentence speaks of there needing to be a training. You need to study this as a craft. You need to acknowledge that you are navigating through something that you should go from this herky-jerky, uncomfortable, tense, even maybe movement to until you're able to ebb and flow into a state of balance with your mate. Um, and the only way to do that is through learning and training. And so with that, I think, we're doing these readings to really share. And of course, this is all a study tool for us in ANU. But it's important if you're here and you're listening, whether live or after the fact, that you really think about whether you're mated or desire to be mated. What are you studying? What is foundating the idea of matrimony? Or is it truly just an idea? Is it truly just, this is what I pictured when I was 7 years old, when I was playing with my dolls? This is what I fantasized about when I listened to those songs or watched those movies, or this is what I saw my mother, my auntie, my grandmothers. And of course, I'm speaking from the perspective of a woman. That's my lens, of what I saw them do. And then kind of compare that to what we're discussing now and what the prescription is within this particular tome. Because I'm sure what you would realize is that you too had no idea that what it took to successfully navigate through matrimony is study, training, and learning. And the final thing that I want to touch on is the idea that when you look at these texts, you can work them back, each sentence, when I say them, each sentence, backwards and forward and back. I'm going to start forward, right? Forward and back. When we examine this final sentence, what I realized is the kingdom was listed last, right? So the first thing that's acknowledged is that you need to know yourself. You need to know your natural mate. You need to know and recognize your natural mate. And then the purpose that the creator has for that union. But we know purpose, the creator's purpose is always that overarching. It's almost like the cipher that everything else functions within. And then you have the knowledge of self and the recognition of your natural mate. And so really, really examine every word of the text, which is a part of the preface anyway.
Mhm.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Do we have anything in the chat just
We
yet?
do not. So I will take this time to just acknowledge the Anu members in the house. And big shout out and thanks to Sovereign Eats, who gave the notice for this evening. So we know that Sister Moksha is in the house. Greetings and give thanks for being the wrench. Sister Kashia, Shalom, Sister Munira, Shalom, Chief Yuya, give thanks for being in this space. Iya Sequoia, we have someone, Nicole, give thanks, Shalom, thank you for being in the space. Ema Akuya, and Brother Antonio, Sister Brittany, and I think that's it. So we do have some responses. So I'll read through some of those. So Brother Antonio says, and so I think this response is in definition to the initial question, like our main question, which is how do we train? So Brother Antonio says, I've been practicing for matrimony through studying how it is defined by my community slash culture. In the past, I used popular media to as a reference point, haven't we all? Now it is based on knowing my own shape. Give thanks. Ima Sequoia says, how do we train for marriage? Number one, learn what a woman is. That is very key, very good, especially from this perspective of women. And that's that know thyself, right? So know what a woman is, know what it means to be woman and feminine. Practice, which is the mechanics. Number two, practice, which is the mechanics, functioning within your natural role. Absolutely. Number three, have a purpose, know how you want to serve. These are excellent. Give thanks. Sister Munira says, I've been using my, so this is in a response to the question of how do you use your time? How have you used your time to practice? The other question was, or how have you squandered it? So Munira says, I have been using my time to prepare myself to be a capable helpmeet. Preparation includes building my relationship with Yah, healing self, study, and learning new skills to contribute to managing the home. Excellent, absolutely. Brother Antonio says, knowing what needs to be removed and what vision the Most High has implanted in me. Also, knowing what role I play as a man. So, that I think is in response to the initial question about how we train for marriage. Sister Kashia says, I think this is a response to how she's used her time. I've been really diving into the covering initiative. That is initiative we have here going on in ANU. And if you make sure that you keep abreast of the website and when applications go live, and you'll know what the covering initiative is. Right now, it's members only. No. So I've been really diving into the covering initiative. This has been the best form of training for me. Understanding
Mm.
role and sliding right into it willfully and anticipating more growth. Thanks for your shares. So we're going to we want to close out because we want to share our list and its completeness, what we came up with after reading this section of the reading. So and then we have a small little addition afterwards. So Ema Precious, if you will.
Sure. I would like to touch on something in Brother Antonio share, and thank you for all that responded to the several questions. And I'm sure you've crafted your own list, right? Because this is not just living in this moment. This is something that you are going to study and practice and train to maintain appropriate matrimony, whether now or down the road. But Brother Antonio spoke about knowing what needs to be removed. And I think in my mind, I kind of went to, well, what if you don't know, right? What if things are just removed from you? Because sometimes you get the opportunity to be shown a thing, and then you still have to recognize that that thing needs to be removed. But sometimes you just things are just snatched away, right? Things that you really that don't serve you very well. And so just going back to that crystallization, right? I'm gonna use my pen. We tend to hold on,
Mhm.
and we're holding on, not realizing that we don't need to hold on. So sometimes it is just being fluid enough, being receptive enough, and knowing the environment enough to surrender, to surrender to the removal, because it's not always that it'll be an active thing of letting go. Many things will just be removed.
Yeah.
And it'll be us that'll kind of seek it out or try to hold on to it longer than we need to. So there's that.
Snatchy, right?
Snatchies.
Snatchy's the greatest. Says, "Oh, you're not moving fast enough." Yoink. Teach you that lesson.
There you go. She just coined a new word. Snatchies.
I don't know. I'm sure somebody said it somewhere, but if not, you heard it here first.
There you go. Um, so what we would like to do now is to when thinking about divine purpose and that fluidity and that silk like movement that we're striving for, right? So you want to move real smooth like, right? Because that's what silk is. You can't even sit on it too good without sliding right off, right? So that was funny. With that, um, we want to hear about your lists. Yeah. So while we gave let's go through them one more time. Matrimony, community, mechanics, body workings, reflexive, time and practice, which are together. And the seventh is the creator. So, there's a lot of power behind the number seven in our list being the creator. Because in a particular system, seven is the number for the Most High Yah, for divinity. So in that, this is our power list, our list of the seven imperatives for matrimonial training. We want in the chat, as we close out, to continue this dialogue and for you all to share what you have gleaned as the imperatives. You can use the ones that we've listed, or you can identify your own or a combination therein. But we'd love to read and respond throughout the strong to you all in the comments regarding what you came up with,
Right.
because we really want this to be something that you learn from and build upon, so
Mhm.
that we can all get the training that we need.
Yeah. And our list is not in any particular order. So the second question is, how would you prioritize your list? So as Ema Precious said, if you want to put something in now before we close out, please feel free. I know there's a delay, so we'll give you a little bit of time. We'll talk. But if not, we would say, and if you're watching this video afterwards, because this is a live, tune in later wherever you are, please comment in the chat. Like, what is your list and how would you prioritize it? And we want to see those comments in the chat and we'll get back to you. So while we're waiting for messages from the chat, I do want to just go back and remind, we touched on it very slightly before, that applications for coming into ANU are going to open on March 21st, which is the spring equinox. And you can find those applications on the ANU Life Global Ministries website, which is www.anulifeglobal.org. That's hard, right? www.anulifeglobal.org. And you can find the applications in both ANU Woman, and that's for the women, and ANU Man, which is for the men. So that's where you'll go for applications. The other thing that I want to add, make sure that I add, is that this tome, the Anu Way Foundations, is also available on the website, and it is a free download, a free book download. And we encourage you all to download it. If you have not, you can even, I think, print it on your own, because we have a few printed copies. And it's a really good read. It's an excellent read, I should say, that you should dive into every day. It is a guide for how we do things. It is a guide for culture, foundations of culture. Other readings that are also available on the website or even Amazon.com are Solutions for Dysfunctional Families, which we have referenced in our readings many times. Also, the 14 Keys, also been referenced. Noir Male, The Compass, as well as Mind, Heart, Words, all written by Chief Jegna, Chief Yuya. So please make sure you visit the website, again, to keep up to date on the applications being released, as well as looking into downloading or purchasing the readings for yourself. So we do have one comment in the chat. Brother Antonio, he gave us his list and he prioritized it. I think, please correct me if I'm wrong, if this is not prioritized or it's just the list. So I'll read it. Community, mechanics, craft, formula, mathematics, knowledge, study, which is doing the knowledge, right? And body work, navigating, reflexive, time, and practice.
Hmm.
Thanks. Give thanks.
Give thanks for that. And now, so the challenge, Brother Antonio, is for you to work your list as you prioritized it, right? To craft the art of being
Prioritized.
studious.
Very good. And so we also just
Oh,
want
not prioritized.
right
Okay. Hmm.
pay attention to the chat. That training actually begins from childhood, truthfully, and continues into learning and applying the attributes of femininity and womanhood. Exactly. And so definitely bringing us back to that being fluid in our navigation and evolving. So I believe that's it. We are 27. Oh, we have another one. Sister Kashia says, I like the 7 that were mentioned. I would reorder them with community and matrimony being 1 and 2, and then the others working simultaneously. So there's 1, 2, and there's a whole host of things you have to do for number 3. Okay, cool. And again, like if you're watching this later, please put your lists and how you prioritize them in the chat. So I think it's good. We can definitely close out. Give thanks to everyone for being here and bearing with us with the delay. We definitely appreciate you being here with us and opening up the Shabbat with us on Yom Shishi, but it's sundown, so it's Shabbat. So, so we
Thanks.
give thanks for being here. Give thanks, Ema Precious, because she also was waiting. So, give thanks. I don't see anything else in the chat. So, with that, I think we'll close off. Ema Precious, do you mind reading the preface one more time so we can close out properly?
I don't mind. Just let me pull it up. Just 1 second. Okay. Here we go. Let me make it bigger so I can see. Okay. This book is not to be read only once. Read the words of this book of knowledge and wisdom out loud. Discuss the convictions of this work with your Anu brothers and sisters. Share this information with your people. This publication should be read daily. I'm going to say that again. This publication should be read daily.
People in the back. One more time.
This publication should be read daily. Every line in this book can be taken out of context and studied on the strength of its own potential. The truth is to be deliberated. And with that, we say peace.
Please give thanks for being here, and we will see you in the forward. Shabbat Shalom.